Okay,
Okay.
I think it's going. So you're on.
All right, great. Well, hey, thanks everybody for joining us. I'm Emily Sweeney. I'm a reporter at the Boston Globe, and this discussion is sponsored by the New England chapter of the Society of Professional Journalists. We have as our guest Billy Baker, a colleague of mine at the Globe, and also fellow Boston Latin graduate from the class of '93. And Billy, you just came out with a new book, so I figured, I wanted to ask you some questions about, how it all came to be. Yeah, so maybe you can tell us a little bit about, how what gave you the idea for writing the book.
Well, my high school friends abandoned me, and then what I guess so. I've been doing a lot of these things. Unfortunately, I feel like I've been cheated out of the fun book tour, and I just stare at a screen all the time and talk about myself. I'm entirely sick of talking about myself, but I will tell my little spiel, which is so I got conned into doing a story by an editor. Happens to the best of us. The idea was, Doug Most, not Doug Most. My God, that's like 20 years old. Francis Storrs, who's the editor of the Boston Globe magazine, sent me an email saying I have a story you'd be perfect for. And then when I sat down across from him, he said, I want you to write about how middle-aged men have no friends. And in a split second, I was having a midlife crisis. It was like, am I middle-aged? Do I have no friends? Why am I perfect for this? All this stuff. And so I kind of told him I'd think about it. And then I marched back to my desk. And by the time I got back to my desk, I was trying to talk my way out of it. By the time I got to my desk, I realized that I was I was kind of perfect for the story, not because I was unique in any way, but because I was just entirely too common. I was a sort of person that had, wife and career and family and all these things. And next thing you know, I'm like, I can't even think of the last time I saw my best friends. And so, so I wrote the article. I did the basic journalism. I talked to experts and read studies and all this stuff. And then the morning came when the article was due, and I sat in my office at home and had a full-blown panic. It was like, what is it they want me to say? That I'm like a loser? Fine, I'll say. And I wrote the worst type of article there is, which is the meta article about how you don't want to write this article, just the lamest hack material. I wrote it fully thinking that the editors would be like, haha, good try, but now write a real article. Instead, they liked it, they published it, and then it became this thing. It became this weird viral mania. I've written God knows how many articles in my life, many of which I was convinced were going to be this big viral hit. And this one, it had a really wordy, awful title. It was something like the biggest threat facing middle-aged men is not smoking or obesity, it's loneliness. That doesn't sound like clickbait to me, but it very quickly, it was, I was told it became the most popular article the Globe had ever published. And interestingly, it was defeated for that title by an article titled, "Here's What Tom Brady Eats on a Typical Day," which, I mean, how do you compete with that? So anyway, this article becomes this viral thing. It's viral in weird places. It's very popular in Alberta, Canada. All of a sudden, I'm doing radio interviews all the time, 5 straight interviews in Alberta, Canada, and then in Australia, in addition to everywhere in the US. And pretty soon, I'm the guy on NPR talking about lonely men, and it wasn't the thing, wasn't my life's dream. And so what I realized immediately in writing this article is that people weren't, so when it was first pitched to me by the editor, it was pitched because apparently there's this loneliness epidemic going on, and it's not just affecting men, it's affecting everybody, old, young, male, female. And what's staggering about it is that it's not just it doesn't just have consequences for your mental health, it has consequences for your physical health, which still kind of blows my mind. There's this idea that, eating wings with friends is healthier than eating broccoli alone. And the data supports this, right? And again, I still can't believe it, but everything you don't want to get, cancer, heart disease, diabetes, whatever it is, everything is dramatically increased by not having a sort of healthy, regular social circle. which I didn't have at that moment. You know, I'm lucky to have many good friends from life. Many of them are staring at me right now on the screen, but like I wasn't seeing them anymore. So when I started here, you know, so this article's viral and I'm hearing from, I mean, the emails are coming by like the thousands. It was crazy. And no one was questioning me on the epidemic. No one was questioning me on these sort of dire health consequences. No one was really questioning me on the cancer. They were all like, well, what's the cure? And it was like, okay, the cure is friendship, right? It's like the easiest answer in the world, but how? How do you do that? So I agree to write a book, and immediately I go through this panic where I'm like, what does that mean? I gotta like solve friendship. I gotta be that guy, right? And so when I thought, you know, I tacked it as a journalist, I started doing the research on loneliness, on all these sort of, you know, these life-changing miracles of friendship. But I also had to start repairing things in my own life. And so the first thing I did was essentially try and get the band back together. You know, I mean, I had a squad of guys. Most of them were people I went to high school with, and I started, you know, trying to reconnect with them. I started some gimmicky things. I tried to bring back senior skip day for our high school class, which none of these people went to.
Yeah, I remember that. I think I got an invite, but I didn't make it.
I tried to bring back, you know, the night before Thanksgiving, which always felt like this sort of unofficial reunion night, right? Like nobody showed up for that, zero. Sorry, one person came to that. But other than the like big gimmicky things, I was trying to like get my head around stuff. So something that was stated as a fact from the very beginning was that women are better at this than men. And I've been around women my whole life. It was like, well, what is it that they're doing that makes them better at this than I? And so for a while, I was really like snooping. I was trying to steal something from the girls' cabin and bring it back to the boys' cabin and be like, this is what they do over there. This is what we need to do. And I think a lot of it, like there's a lot of psychology on like the fear of being called gay within men. And like, so women you don't have that, you know, and it's like, it's the dumbest thing because it's like, other than being like super insulting to gay people, it's never used in the context of like being homosexual. It's used to say like, you're kind of acting like a girl here, but it's in the exact moments when it's like, we should be, you guys are good at certain things that we're very bad at. So anyway, I went on this journey. Initially, it was about like getting the band back together. I had great success. I really reconnected with a lot of people. The popularity of the initial article became this easy go-between where everyone I've ever met seemed to reach out and go, ha ha, I always knew you were a loser. But you know, that was just enough to kind of like, we had some contact, we were having some fun. But I moved to the North Shore like a few years before I wrote this article. And the truth was that, you know, while it was great to hang out with my boys back in Boston, like at the end of the day, I just didn't have anyone to like hang out with on a Wednesday night. It was like this thought experiment in a way. When I first wrote the article, I mentioned meeting this guy who had said that he and his friends had this Wednesday night thing. It was essentially a pact that on Wednesday night they'd get together and hang out. And I remember when I heard it thinking, I'll steal that when the time is right. And I realized that I was past due to steal this idea. But the thing was, you know, I was in a new community. I was in a new place. And so, you know, there were lots of people where like, I'd met them and we seemed to connect and we'd say, oh, we should get that beer or whatever it might be. But like, you know, it very rarely happened, or it's hard to hammer anything into the schedule when you're a middle-aged adult. And so the sort of culmination of this weird journey was that I decided that I was going to try and make new best friends.
Like literally just go around introducing yourself, saying like, hey, will you be my friend?
That probably would have been more smooth, but like, so when I did a lot of things. They're all in this book, which one of them was there's this thing called Dunbar as a number, which is this idea that humans can only have 150 strong social connections. And I don't think it's supposed to be used this way, but I sat down, I went through everyone in my phone, everyone in my Facebook contacts, all this stuff, and wrote down the names of basically everyone I gave a shit about. And Dunbar defined it as those 150 people as the people that you would not feel embarrassed to have a drink with if you ran into them in a bar. And so using that calculus, I started just writing down the names of everyone. And sure enough, it came out to exactly 150 people. I was writing Post-it notes, sticking them on the wall. Like if the FBI had raided my house at that moment, it wouldn't have been a good look, right? But like 150 names on the wall. And what was there, it was illuminating in many ways, but what was interesting was how many people were like aspirational friends. This is a term often used for romantic relationships, but I'd met them and I'd felt some sort of spark, right? But I hadn't converted them from acquaintances to friends. And so what I did was I basically started this like Wednesday night fraternity for middle-aged guys by I got this guy to give me his barn on Wednesday nights. I sent out invitations to a dozen guys that were all in this vague category where I don't know why, I don't know how to explain it, but I've met you, it seemed like we connected. I thought these things would happen more fluidly, more naturally, because when I picture my own parents, their friends, when I was a kid, their friends seemed to be the other parents of the kids that I hung out with, the at the sporting events or whatever it might be. And it wasn't clicking in that way. So I tried to make it happen, which is super awkward. So I sent out these invitations to 12 guys, said, meet me in a barn. I did it, I didn't tell them much more because I don't know, I was super nervous. I went to the barn.
What did you guys do in the barn?
I mean, well, when they got there, because I clearly, I was so nervous that mouth diarrhea was happening. I just told them much of the story I just told you, I'm on this journey. I don't know. Some of you I know, some of you I've only met once. I'm about to panic. How's it going? I want to start this club. I hope you'll join it. Blah, 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 really just, sweat in awkward places. The whole thing is happening. And at the end, they gave me a standing ovation, in that moment of awkward silence. And I was not a standing ovation, an ovation. And it was I could see it in their faces. They were all oh shit, this is kind of me as well. So by raising my hand, saying I'm a loser, by whatever, I became the safe space, and they could pick on me, but it was a bonding mechanism. So yeah, so that's what I did. I wrote a book about it. The book contains lots of, to me, mind-blowing science on friendship and loneliness and just all these things I never really wanted to think about. I never wanted to, this is the first time you've invited me to the SPJ, Emily. I'm glad it's so I could talk about what a loser I am. I've done other things in my journalism career,
well,
but
I've been wondering what it's like being the public face of loneliness. You know what I mean? It must be.
So you know what, and I get asked that a lot, and I don't know that I'm the public face, but so when I first wrote the initial article, the Surgeon General was a guy named Vivek Murthy. He was Obama's Surgeon General. And the loneliness epidemic was his thing. If you remember when we were kids, C. Everett Koop was going after cigarettes and putting the warning on stuff. So this Surgeon General, his thing was a loneliness epidemic, and no one was really paying attention to him because it's a topic that kind of clears the room, right? Even today, when the word loneliness comes up, I'm I cringe a little. I don't want to talk about it, but he's talked to me about we were on Tom Ashbrook's show together before Tom Ashbrook got canceled, or whatever he got. He didn't even go down in the Me Too thing. He was apparently just a jerk. And it was the first time people were talking about these things. But I bring this all up because it feels to me like this is a moment for this topic. I mean, certainly COVID helped make it something that's okay to talk about. But, if you talk to psychiatrists, they'll say there's been great work done in the last couple decades on things like depression. Someone walking into a psychiatrist's office and saying, I'm depressed, or I'm an alcoholic, or I'm an addict, but no one walks in to say they're lonely. There's this thing in England called the Silver Line Helpline, and it's just for lonely senior citizens. And they get something like 10,000 calls a day, and almost none of them call saying they're lonely. They just call to talk. They ask for a recipe for basting a turkey. There's one woman that calls every hour to ask for the time, they just need someone to talk to, but there's some sort of pride in not wanting to admit these things. So if whatever happened to me made it a safe space, if picking on me, if I mean, the book is called We Need to Hang Out. Like the hope is like, you just hand it to someone that's your go between, like, listen to this idiot story. And maybe that means you then make that little bit of effort, you know? And so honestly, it's been like the best gift I've ever given myself. And it was, you know, by taking an assignment, then taking on a book and forcing myself to make these things. All of my friendships are stronger across the board. And I have to say, the one criticism I get over and over is, why didn't you discuss male-female relationships? And I always say it's because those are in many instances the strongest ones in my life. But I'm actually looking at like 4 women that I used to be very good friends with that I've never talked to anymore. So Emily, I work with, so you're exempt from that. But you know, like, it's a valid question, you know, like, I don't know, how do you, is that just how life goes? Like,
I mean, it could be a sequel. I don't know.
I was at Tara Leach's birthday party the night the Challenger blew up, right? Like, I mean, is that like, that just rolls
There's
down
history
the
there.
river,
That's
you know?
great.
I mean, you know, I mean, life intervenes, right? But I don't know. I hope that this awkward journey I got dragged into makes it somewhat smooth. I mean, there's a takeaway. It's as simple as like, call your friends, you know, try and connect with that person you felt a spark with, be willing to be vulnerable, something the men are taught not to do. But anytime I put myself into a vulnerable position, I'm rewarded. I've been rewarded. No one, thankfully, we're old enough where I'm not being stomped on or stuffed in a locker or anything like that. I'm being rewarded with somebody that's like, you know what? Yeah, me too. So anyway.
I gotta say, one of my favorite parts of the book, I was so jealous, is that you went on a New Kids on the Block cruise.
I did.
How was that? And I know
was-
you were kind of acting as a fly on the wall to see how girls' trips like worked. Is that?
Yeah. So I mean, so I kept hearing like, women are great at this, women are the best at this, and the pinnacle is the girls' trip. Right? You know, like, it's this great thing. It's kind of held up aloft as the crowning moment in American friendship, is the girls' trip. And like, you know, I just wanted to do sort of the lame reporter shtick where I went on one, but the second I went on one, it wouldn't be a girls' trip anymore. And then I went to the New Kids on the Block at Fenway. And at some point, somebody mentioned, you know, there's a cruise that it's just like 4,000 women. And I was like, this is my opportunity to go on a million girls trips at once, and no one would care. And also secretly, I kind of wanted to go on the New Kids on the Block cruise. Like, it's which, off topic, we've been watching. I'm in my in-laws' basement in South Boston, Virginia. As you can see, there's like a pool table and a weight bench around. But we've been watching. John Knight has a new makeover show, a home makeover show, like a fixer-upper. Does everyone know this? This is important knowledge, but we've been watching it upstairs. And like you, Emily, he has, no matter where he's gone in life, he's kept that Dorchester accent going.
Hey, there you go. Keep it alive, you know?
I'm always impressed. Like, Emily, just like, you know, like, he's the only person at the globe with a really strong accent. I love it.
Seriously. Writing the book, did it take you longer than you thought? I mean, I know there's a lot of writers here. I mean,
Yeah.
Can you tell a little bit about the process of writing it? Because I mean, I know that's quite a project.
Yeah, I mean, it's, yeah, you commit to it and they give you $12 for a book deal, and then you stare at this blank screen and you're like, I've made a terrible mistake, right? Like, you're just committed to get through the end of this thing. You know what's more interesting to me? Not the book writing process, but like what happens after that? Like, I you know, there's journalists here, so I guess this is the anyway, like, you know, my whole life, I think I secretly dreamed of writing a book. And, you know, you write a book, and then the day comes when it comes out, and you're like, what do I expect to happen now? Like, I don't know. Like, it's kind of like you have this book birthday, and then what does happen it didn't feel the way I thought it would. Like, the book came out on January 26th, and right away someone was like, the New York Times reviewed it, and I was hiding underneath my bed at that moment. It was like, what? Oh, so now all of a sudden, like, strangers get to pass judgment on me and it has consequences? I mean, I'm used to writing a newspaper article where, you know, people tell me like, kill yourself, and I'm like, okay, and then I just go write another one the next day. But this had weird stakes. And then there was this one moment where and then you're doing like these interviews, and like, I've listened to a million author interviews on NPR, and of course, like, when the tape starts rolling for you, like, you know, I put on my NPR voice and I try to say things that sound like they're sensible, but I'm still the same. Like I did, you know, like it becomes very like, and also like I don't know, I remember being a kid when you'd see like someone you liked on Letterman and then you'd see them on Leno telling the same story and you'd feel betrayed, you know, but you realize like they only have so many anecdotes from that movie they made, right? So I did 3 back-to-back hours on NPR stations in different cities. And by the 3rd hour, I honestly stopped mid-sentence and said to the host, like, have I already told this story? Like, I don't know what's going on at this moment. Like, this is not, I don't know what I thought it would be, but yeah, I never thought it would make me appreciate getting to write newspaper articles that are at the bottom of the birdcage by the end of the day. But like, there's a beauty to that kind of floating down the river. And now with the book, you're in the marketplace. You're supposed to promote it. I don't know. It feels very awkward to me. But this is fun.
All right, that's cool. Well, I'm glad you're doing this. You know, and I want to give another shout out to your book. The title is "We Need to Hang Out: A Memoir of Making Friends."
Okay.
And you know, do you have any other projects coming up? Whatever happened to your juggling book? Talk about that?
No, that was
Okay.
that's I spent 5 years trying to write a book about jugglers, and
Must be up in the air.
exactly. It was they're kind of mad at me because I spent 5 years wasting a lot of time of the world's best jugglers, and they're like, "Oh, you wrote a book about how you're a loser? How about writing that book about us? You were saying you were going to write." I hate to admit it, but I'm actually committing to my next book now, which is not about jugglers, but writing a book. Back to answering your question, I found writing a book to be like, it's like a forced reflection, at least for the sort of book I wrote in the next book as well. There's something like awful about having to live your life where everything you do has to end up as content, end up as like a story. You know, I do a lot of these sort of features where I just go out and do something, and it's like I then write about it. And there are moments where I wish I could do something, you know, without the sort of journalism camera around. But it's also, again, like a gift. Like I'm about to take on this other book, and I think it'll be a 2 or 3 year project, and it's going to force me to do things that in my head I've said I'm going to do, or I babble to my wife about how I'm going to get my act together and do this. Like once you sign the dotted line and say you're going to write a book, you got to write a book.
Yeah. Well, I'm so intrigued. Can you talk about what it's about or anything, or it's still too early?
We'll say it's too early. Okay. It's not interesting. Yeah, we'll say it's too early.
You're not selling it well, Billy.
I'm not. But, well, can we open it up for questions?
Yeah, totally.
Comments from all these people I know that are on this talk.
Yeah. Anybody have any questions?
Anything they want to say? Do you want me to call on you? Because I know some of you.
I think Mary asked you a question in the chat box.
Oh, sorry. There's a chat box.
Oh, I asked it in front of the large group.
Were any of us on the wall? All right.
When you made the wall, I'm friends.
Yeah, no, let me just say this. So
For the 150?
I wrote down the name of 150 friends, and I have to say, it seems like every person I went to high school with, I'm glad you're all getting this, has reached out. The very first is, so the Globe magazine ran an excerpt of the book, and it featured that. In like the moment it hit the press, I got an email from Tamitha Baker from the clouds saying, I better be on that wall. So many of my high school friends were on the wall. I will say yes. It was a nice thing to think about because like, I'm just going to single out Tara Leach. We went to school together forever, starting when? In like 4th grade or something, straight through high school. Tara moved to San Diego. I haven't seen her in like a jillion years, but like those friendships matter, you know, like, yeah. Mary Fan always had, Mary was, there's this book, this term I use in the book called a velvet hook, which I was trying to come up with a term for what it is that we actually need to keep friendships alive. And velvet hook is the source words for the word Velcro. Velvet crochet is what it is in French, translated in English, that's velvet hook. and I think it's these things that are like soft connectors, not ironclad commitments. But I've realized since I published a book that certain people are velvet hooks. And Mary Finn, when we were in high school, was like a velvet hook. She would have this barbecue every year, and like not just have a barbecue. It would include like a group photo or a photo collage. It was kind of like a sweet thing, you know. And you know what? That's one of those parts of friendship that took a little bit of effort, you know. And I applaud you for doing that. So yes, anyway.
Thanks, Billy. I actually have a real question if there's time. I'm so thinking about like, this is more serious, but just about like being a parent or not. And did you see in your research that being a middle-aged person who is a parent facilitates making new friends, or did you not look into that?
So
I'm asking because of a lot of people who like make friends through their kid's soccer team or whatever, and whether or not you investigated that.
So the book is labeled as a memoir, and I think that was Simon & Schuster trying to protect me, because like there are so many things that can be factors in friendship. You could be a widower, you could be divorced, you could be gay, you could be, you know. So I just wrote about it from my perspective, but there's a lot of research out there on being a parent versus being a non-parent. Like I think there's a lot, in addition to friendship and loneliness kind of being a hot topic right now, like happiness is a hot topic. A lot of people are doing like real research on what it is that makes us happy. And parenting seems to be one that comes up, where there's a study that says it makes you happier, and then there's a study that says it makes you less happy. So I don't know offhand what are you, well, Mary, why don't I ask you, the thing is I'm not an expert. I think everyone's an expert on friendship. Do you think it's harder for you?
No,
No?
I think it's, I don't know, I think everybody's circumstances are different. I think that there's a built-in connection when you're standing next to somebody on a soccer field watching your kids play. But at the age we're at, a lot of people's kids are now independent. And so I've seen friendships that are built around soccer games start to wither when kids turn 12. Whereas like, I don't have kids, so my connections are less ephemeral and less like situational.
Yeah, it makes sense. I think something I did look into a little bit, and I'm kind of experiencing in my own life, is like my dad retired, and now like he's lost all his like, you know, like I think that he had a network that was entirely built around his kids, and when that went off, it was entirely built around his work. And then when that went off, he's just sitting at home watching Law and Order every day, and then he goes to Castle Island, sits in his car, and falls asleep reading a book. That's like every day. That's like his routine. So yeah, every situation is different, but I think they all have the same answer, which is that it takes a little bit of effort. You often hear about how it takes work to keep a romantic relationship alive, but the same can be said for friendships. And by being willing to work on my friendships, is that when I say I've given myself this great gift, it was a result of putting in that work.
Anybody else have questions?
I have one.
All right,
I was
Jess.
just wondering, in your research, did you like come across anything that would indicate that it's like a uniquely American phenomenon? And excuse me if it's in the book, I haven't fully read it through. I will.
Well, I mean, I just gave you the cliff notes of the book. I don't need you to read it. I do need you to buy it. So there's a lot of this that is uniquely American. And it's sad. There's a lot of it, especially when it comes to men. A lot of the barriers to male intimacy seem to be American barriers. It's cultural. It's learned. You know, this idea that you can't be you know, close to a guy, or that you can't tell a guy that you love him or care about him unless you've had a million beers, or whatever the rules are. I was interviewed yesterday by a guy from Esquire magazine who has been basically locked in his apartment in Brooklyn during the whole pandemic with his best friend. And at some point he realized he hasn't touched another person in like, 15 months, and was like, why is it that guys just don't touch each other? And there's some landmark studies that actually prove that they don't, but I think the why question was what he was trying to get to the heart of. So I think the why has to do a lot with that, whatever it is that is the American culprit in all this. But it's certainly, there's a loneliness epidemic being documented in Canada and in Australia. In England, I'm sure you all heard a few years ago, England got a ton of publicity by naming a minister of loneliness as like a cabinet level position. So there's certainly, it's a global problem. Certainly social media seems to not be helping. It's connecting us, but in loose ways, or it's connecting us in ways where it seems like we get mad at each other for the littlest things. I quit social media as part of this book project because everything I read about social media seemed to be suffering from a chicken and the egg problem, where we knew people who used social media a lot were lonelier than those who didn't. But there was no telling if they went there because they were lonely or if social media made them lonely. So I quit to just see what effect it had on me. And I can say that like this election cycle seemed to go so much smoother for me because I wasn't getting into petty arguments in my head with people that, either were, wildly different from me or far to the extreme of me or whatever it might be. So it also, I realized, so I went to our high school reunion. I say our because many of these people are high school classmates of mine. Well, I guess it was our 25th reunion, maybe like a year or two ago. And just before I went, I was down at Yale doing this thing where I interviewed a happiness professor, and I was talking to some students, and one of the students made a point where like he wasn't going to go to any reunions because they were unnecessary with Facebook. Like, we don't have to catch up. I'll know what everyone's up to. And then when I went to our high school reunion, I kind of looked around and it was like, oh, hey, you've got two kids. Oh, right. And it was like, it wasn't, wasn't that we were robbed of a chance to catch up, but it had this fake veneer that we still knew each other, or we were still in each other's lives. And so I quit social media like right after that. And then recently, when I've reconnected with people, I went for a hike with this woman, Dina Rudick, who used to be a Globe photographer. I haven't talked to her in years. We went for a hike a couple weeks ago. We spent like 3 hours catching up. And it was like, if I had stayed on Facebook, I would have known like I'm not sure that, it would have been that dramatically different, but her husband had cancer. I didn't know anything, all of a sudden it was like her chance to kind of, like talk about these things. And it felt more, I don't know, it felt real. It felt more human. And it also felt like I had to schedule a hike to see her. Otherwise, like, I just it wouldn't have been that thing passing by my social feed. At the same time, there are drawbacks where like, I should have known that someone's husband had cancer or their, parent died or whatever it might be. So, there's no perfect, I'm not an advocate saying that everyone needs to quit social media, but for me, it seemed to be the right decision.
Did you continue? Do you still use any social media at all? Or
I have a Finstagram. I think that's what the kids call it, a fake Instagram. But I just follow like surfers and David Beckham. So
Gotcha.
yeah, important things.
And somebody wrote in the chat. They were wondering what is the best way to buy your book that will benefit you the most.
I don't know. I get asked that a lot, and I don't know. I think there is the all-powerful Amazon. So the more sales, the more reviews. But yeah, I whichever way, support your local bookstore, I guess.
Okay. And we also got another question too, and being asked, did you outline your book or did you just start writing?
I did outline it. I became like a Post-it note guy also. But yeah, I did try to, because it was like, I had to write a book about friendship, and it was like trying to find an arc through my own life. I definitely went on a purposeful journey for the book, but having an outline helped, and having an outline of things yet to come helped a lot too, because it was like, all right, like, there were moments when I said I should start a Wednesday night guys fraternity, but like, you know, to see it on the board, on the wall and be like, I got to get to that point in the book made me have to like swallow hard a couple times and make these things happen. Yeah.
Gotcha. Any other questions from anybody?
I have a question, Billy, and I bought your Audible book because I wanted to hear the story in your voice. So I bought that. Were you surprised by how many people wrote to you? I thought one of the things that was cool was when you said you actually took the time to respond to a lot of people and you were really touched by some of the stories. And so I was curious if that caught you off guard when you got so many responses.
It totally did. I mean, I've been writing stories for a long time, and like, you know, and the readers are usually very nice to me, to be honest, you know, but like a popular article might generate like 200 or 300 emails, like a really popular one. And this was like thousands, you know, it was out of control. And so many of them were like confessional. And so now the book is out and I'm getting them all the time now. And like the least I can do is write back, but it feels like the thing that made it uncomfortable was a lot of people that were writing to me clearly needed like real clinical help, you know, like they didn't need me to tell them what to do. Like they were clinically lonely and they were, you know, at a point of despair. And so, you know, I mean, there's these things called deaths of despair. They've been on the rise for middle-aged white Americans and that's the only demographic where mortality is on the rise. And I think it's attributed to these things like depression, keeping stuff inside, loneliness, alcoholism, all this stuff. And so when I would hear from people like that, it felt very callous of me to just say, here's what worked for me, buddy. Like instead I had to say kind of this, like, you should probably talk to someone, which is such a soft euphemism nowadays for like, you know, you need better help than I can give. But a lot of the emails, like the best emails, which came, I think I mentioned this in the book, like right away, a lot of people were like, yo, my wife sent me your article and I started reading it. I was like, oh, this is my deal. And I couldn't even get through it. I just sent an email to like 10 buddies and we're going fishing this weekend. It was like, right, thank you. Like that's the easiest thing I could hope for. But yeah, I took a long time to reply to all of them. The Globe actually offered to give me an intern to reply to them. I was like, you're just gonna have some intern or like write back to these people? And I must say that I know there's a lot of journalists on this call. Sometimes you get these emails from people that say, I've never written to a journalist before, but I just wanted to say this. And it's like the nicest email you can receive. And one time I received that email from someone. I said, you know what? I've never written to a journalist either. So I'm going to send an email to these two women. One was at the Washington Post, one was at the LA Times that I really admired. So I sent them fan mail and neither of them replied. And I hate them to this day. So I've made it a point to reply to every human that ever sends me an email. Like they're dead to me and I don't want to be dead to these people that do read my stuff. Anyway.
And Mary Finn also had another question. She was wondering how you found the time to write the book, like, you know, just time management, logistics. How did you do it?
I took a 6-month leave from the Globe to write the book at the very beginning of this process. It was like a 2-year process. And I took 6 months off at the beginning to basically like churn out as much as I could. And then it made it much more manageable. But yeah, I mean, it's just, a blank screen and a deadline is just sadly like part of my life. Like if my wife hears one complaint from me, it's that I want to live like 1 second of my life without a looming deadline. And so it's just a manageable thing. And so, yeah, it wasn't fun. You know, it definitely is one of those things where it's like, yeah, I woke up at 4 o'clock in the morning or I, you know, skipped a whole Saturday, but yeah, yeah. So, sorry, I'm not, it's like, Josh wants to join a cult.
There's a great question here.
Cults don't sound all that bad, right? Like, I think they get a bad rap on a whole, but there are definitely some cults where it's like, I would have had fun in that cult, right?
So you didn't join any cults? I mean.
I tried to start one, my little Wednesday night thing. And I'll tell you, like, so this Wednesday night crew that I started, the primary story in the book finish right before COVID hit. And having that was like very valuable. We basically turned into a Wednesday night bonfire group because it was one of the few things he could do safely. And I kind of feel like a fool. This isn't in the book because this all happened afterward, but I tried every damn thing in the world. And it turns out all that humans need is to gather around a fire. Like we've had like the most like sort of quality, intimate time. And it turns out like, who knew that a bunch of guys were pyromaniacs? Like every night ends with like a neighbor almost calling the cops on us because we've like lit a fire that's like way too out of control. One of the guys is a fireman. That's our get out of jail free card. Like if they come, we're like, no, he's got it. But these things, you know, it's like a simple pleasure sitting around a fire with friends at the end of a night. I mean, it's how we did it for a long time. And now, when those nights aren't happening, I sit around my phone and half stare at my TV, you know, and that doesn't seem like the way it's supposed to be.
Did you do anything else? Have you like differently now that you've written the book? I mean, I know social media, you pushed out of your life quite a bit. Anything else that you're, doing differently?
I think I'm more deliberate about checking in on some friends, you know, like we all have that friend that seems to like disappear and you're like, no, they're fine. And I just no longer think that they're fine, you know, like part of this book, you know, when the article initially came out, went wild, I emailed it to these two guys that I mentioned in the book, Mark and Rory, who many of you know, and this is all in the book, but Rory immediately replied and was like, oh, I forgot to tell you I moved to Vienna. And I was like, great. I thought we were best friends. You moved to Austria. So he, since COVID started, has been living in an Airstream trailer that he's towing around America. So I do check on him because like he's got a new girlfriend. They're together, but they met up with someone the other day and he told me it's the first time the two of them have met with a friend since COVID began. I'm like, so for 15 months you've been like in the desert in an Airstream? Like, so I check in on him on the regular just to make sure he's okay. But like, just, you know, friends in general, there's this guy, Timmy Talbot, that I grew up with in Southie, who's just always up to no good. So I check in with him just as like a parent to be like, you know, have you stolen anything today? Have you like shot at anyone today? Like just kind of these like, you know, there needs to be an adult checking in on them. And then I have these two boys that I'd written about for the Globe and I kind of became a mentor to them. So I'm much more deliberate about thinking of our friendship in terms of like something I can never miss a day or miss a deadline, you know, maybe miss a day, but like, you know, it matters to stay on it. And I think one of the best parts of COVID is I feel like there was a circle the wagons thing happening. Like it seemed like every group I'd ever been a part of kind of reconnected. I mean, it was those like Zoom calls with your college friends or whatever it might be. And, you know, when you dig into the history of friendship and the psychology of it, you get to this modern question of why do we need friendship now? Because we really do live in a day and age where we could live with no friends at all. You could work from home, you could have everything delivered to your house. And the best theory is that we need friends for when shit hits the fan. And this was the closest to shit hitting the fan that it has ever happened for all of us. And it was nice to see how many people kind of added me to their circle when they were circling the wagons. So, you know, yeah, that's what's changed. I think I'm much more deliberate about being the person that circles the wagons.
Any other questions?
Thank you all for
Yeah.
coming. Like, it's like a lovely night in Boston, isn't it? I'm in South Boston, Virginia. It's like 82 degrees right now. But you should all come visit. Look what I got today. I mean, Virginia is for lovers.
Love that.
It's,
I love that. And also, I want to give a big thank you to the Society of Professional Journalists for putting this on for us. If you have a chance, there's a Twitter handle. It's called SPJ_New England. And if you can follow the Twitter feed, that would be great. And unless there's any other questions, I guess we'll wrap it up. It's so good to see so many familiar faces. I miss you guys. And
Yeah, let's do that Zoom call.
seriously.
Who is that talking? I don't know.
I'm
Oh, is that
I'm
Tara.
lonely.
Are you?
I'm going to be vulnerable. No, I'm just.
Thank you, Tara.
This is really good.
I'm all for it. Oh, well, thank you. That's nice to hear. But I do remember it was the night the Challenger blew up, right? It was like your 4th grade birthday party, right?
January 20 something, right? Well, it wasn't on my birthday.
Okay, all right.
It was in the show.
Wow. Well, this has been fun. Thank you all for coming.
Really nice to see everyone.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you. Talk to you guys soon.